Thank you to everyone here for being a part of this live virtual event. And to those viewing this recording, I'm so happy to see so many familiar and new faces. It is so wonderful. Our community is constantly growing, and I'm so grateful to all of you for showing your support time and time again. As always, I got to give a shout out to my amazing and beautiful parents, Eddie and Lori, who are the most supportive people I know and are always there for me. And tonight, my mom is here, and my dad will be back a little later, so hopefully he'll catch the end of the program. And I want to thank all of the survivors and their families, especially Ann S Arnold and her father, Holocaust survivor Mark Schonwetter, for sharing Mark's testimony with us tonight. Welcome to a special post-Hanukkah 2G Tuesdays, a program that brings children of Holocaust survivors and their families' testimonies to people all over the world. And today we are fortunate to have Holocaust survivor Mark Schonwetter joining us too. So thank you, Ann and Mark, for being here. My name is Michael Mantell. I'm a psychotherapist, an educator, and a 3G, a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. Years ago, with the rise of anti-Semitism, I found myself feeling trapped in conversations, arguing with people who consciously or unconsciously hate Jews. One example is when sharing resources during a Holocaust Remembrance Day with a group of mental health professionals and students. The conversation quickly devolved into an attack on Jews, including the accusation that Jews use the Holocaust narrative to oppress and kill others. All of my time, attention, and energy was being dedicated to people who hate Jews. After trying the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results, I had a different idea. I decidedly shifted my energy, my time, and my attention to educational program for Jews and our allies. In addition to teaching modern Jewish history and other classes at a New York City Hebrew school, in 2020, during the COVID pandemic lockdown, I started these incredible programs. They began as an idea. They became words exchanged in an email or telephone call. Then the first Sundays with Survivors program aired live in October 2020. It began as a one-time private event for friends and family to honor my grandparents' memory and to combat anti-Semitic rhetoric and hate that I was hearing and witnessing all around me. The program was so impactful, thank God, that we added another event and another and another and another, and opened it up to the public. And in 2021, following the success of Sundays with Survivors, we added this great program, 2G Tuesdays. These programs have featured dozens of Holocaust survivors and their families, have reached thousands of people all over the world, and raised about $30,000 to support Holocaust education so far. I'm so grateful that we've been going 3 years strong and counting, and I hope to add 3G Thursdays to the mix in 2024. Sundays with Survivors and 2G Tuesdays became my personal Hanukkah story, my dedication or rededication to the Jewish people and our allies. Rather than focusing solely on putting out the flames of anti-Semitism, which spread like wildfire and intentionally take our focus away from our personal and collective growth, both spiritually and otherwise, and seem to try to make us feel ashamed of who we are as Jews, I turn my attention to rekindling the light that sparks Jewish pride in education and look for ways to keep that eternal light in me and others burning brightly. And since starting these programs, I've also been fortunate enough to contribute to other programs that promote Holocaust education and combat anti-Semitism. I was featured on a TV news segment, co-wrote and contributed to articles, and appeared on panels about Holocaust education and combating anti-Semitism in general and on college campuses. I created fundraising programs that engaged communities, initiated a support group for Jewish therapists, started an alumni chapter to combat anti-Semitism at my alma mater, and was also part of an initiative to bring a Title VI complaint against my alma mater, which is now in an open investigation. And most importantly, I've made connections with survivors, their families, and this incredible community. My grandfather, Mickey Mandelovich, passed away before I was born, and my grandmother, Alice Diamond, in 2008. These programs and the connections I made with all of you helped me connect to them, remember them, and make sure that their lives and the lives of all survivors and their families are never forgotten. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by Ann S Arnold and her father, Holocaust survivor Mark Schonwetter. After graduating from Lehigh and earning her CPA working at Deloitte, Ann ran Lieberfarb Inc., a leading US-based designer and manufacturer of bridal jewelry for over 20 years, where she most recently served as CEO. As a 27-year industry veteran, Ann then founded the Arnold Advisory Group and is now the CFO of H. Arnold Wood Turning Inc., a premier supplier of wood products. And she is also the Chief Strategy Officer of BIG, Buyers Intelligence Group, which provides comprehensive, scalable industry solutions to jewelry retailers and manufacturers. She has many proud accomplishments in and of service to the jewelry field, including being the recipient of distinguished awards alongside her father. And with all she has done, she states that one of her greatest accomplishments was publishing Together, A Journey of Survival, which is one of the most incredible books I've read, a story of her father and his family's Holocaust testimony. In September of 2016, she was awarded with the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Heroes for Tolerance Award. She speaks to people of all ages all over the country and has even written a lesson plan to accompany the book she wrote, which is now being used in many schools. And most recently, in 2019, Ann and her sister, Isabella, established the Mark Schonwetter Holocaust Education Foundation, which provides grants for educators to teach anti-hate initiatives to students nationwide through Holocaust education. Just last week, the foundation announced that it had already awarded grants in 31 states across the US, which is an amazing feat. And with the new Harvard-Harris poll that came out last week, finding that 67% of respondents age 18 to 24 agree that Jews are oppressors and should be treated as such. And 60% of the same cohort believe that the horrific anti-Semitic terrorist attacks on October 7th can be justified, along with another survey 2 weeks ago by The Economist unveiling the very concerning trend among young Americans aged 18 to 29, that 20% of this cohort think the Holocaust is a myth, and also 30% believe Jews have too much power in America. We need to support organizations and foundations like the Mark Schonwetter Holocaust Education Foundation now more than ever. Mark Schonwetter, born in Brzostek, Poland, to farm owners Israel and Sala, was almost 6 years old when Germany invaded Poland in 1939. He and his family lived happily until the Gestapo came into their town and forced them out of their home. One night, Mark's family was taken by the police and never returned home. That night changed their lives forever. Knowing the Gestapo would come look for them next, Mark, his mother, and younger sister escaped from their hometown in the middle of the night to a ghetto, where they spent 3 nights before escaping with the help of a Polish friend. Then the next 3 years, Mark, his mother, and younger sister survived the Holocaust hiding in attics, barns, or in the ground under a pigsty of kind Polish people during the winters, and in the forest during the warm weather months until it was no longer safe. Without giving away too much more about Mark's life, he remained in Poland until 1957, at a time which he immigrated to Israel before being sponsored by family in America to come to the United States. Not knowing a word of English and having only $5 in his pocket, he boarded a ship and made his way across the ocean to start his new life for himself. Following this presentation, we will open the program for Q&A. As I always say, no matter how incredible these programs are, and they always are, the Q&A portion makes it so much more meaningful and special. It's a time for all of us to interact, ask questions, and share our own experiences. During that time, please feel free to raise your virtual hand using the hand raised emoji. Type your questions or comments in the chat box for me to share for you, or unmute yourself to speak. And for this program, if you would like to make a donation to support Holocaust education, I am thrilled that we are spotlighting the Mark Schonwetter Holocaust Education Foundation. The link will be shared in this chat and in the follow-up email, as well as in the description of this video. When you donate, please make sure to write 2G Tuesdays in the optional comments box in the space provided. And with all of that, I welcome Ann and Mark.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's such a pleasure to see all of you. I know how hard it is on a Tuesday at 7 p.m. Everyone's trying to, or at least I'm not sure where everyone's from. So it's 7 p.m. where we are. We're in New Jersey. So thank you so much for being here. I actually am going to share my screen in a moment. And just to kind of hopefully keep you guys all awake, have a few slides to show as I talk. We're going to be doing a little bit of back and forth. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences and then ask my dad a few questions in between so you can hear a little bit of his testimony in that. And then we love the question and answer part. We really want to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you really want to learn about. So with that, can everybody see my screen? Wonderful. So this, growing up as the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, I always knew it was almost like a chip that I wore on my shoulder. And for many, I know there's many of you on this call that are also survivor children. And it's hard to explain it to somebody that isn't, but it's something we live with. I think was a little angrier than my father my whole life. My sister and I were the ones that harbored those feelings of anger and very disillusioned with the world. My father was so positive and kind and nice. And I think my sister and I were the ones that carried a lot of that ourselves. Back when I was in high school, I actually did a survey of my peers and wrote a paper about how many people actually knew what the Holocaust was. And I grew up in Livingston, New Jersey. And if you're from the area, you know it's an area that I thought had a lot of Jews that knew a lot of history, and they didn't. And it shocked me. I never, as you heard, I'm an accountant. I never thought of myself as a writer. But back then, I did write a little bit. And I'd like to start with a poem that I wrote back then. Those of you who feel you are not affected are affected the most. Those of you who feel it did not happen to you will experience it the most. Those of you who don't want to remember will have the most terrifying nightmares. Those of you who think it never happened will live through it again. We hear this statement, never forget. And for me, never forget has two meanings. We must never forget the stories. We must make sure we continue to tell the stories to the next generation and to anyone that would listen. But never forget for me has a second meaning. We must never forget that even in the ugliest times, goodness can prevail. And it's up to us to focus on that goodness. You see, if it wasn't for good people, I wouldn't even be here today. So let me give you a little bit of context. This here is a map of Poland. This red star you see here is Brzostek, which is the tiny village that my dad was born in. In 1939, there was about 1,500 people that lived in this town. 500 of them were Jewish. My grandfather was the head of the Jewish community, and it was a very vibrant community. And for whatever reason, in this tiny area, the Galicia region of Poland, Jews and non-Jews lived very peacefully together. Anti-Semitism was not as rampant as most people here in Poland. As you can see, there's skull and crossbones surrounding it. These are you may have heard of some of course, these concentration camps. Auschwitz, Belzec, Janowska, they were surrounding the forest where my father was from. It's not too far. Krakow is the largest city nearby. By 1945, of those 500 Jewish people, by most accounts, less than 10 of them were still alive, of which 3 was my grandmother, my father, and my aunt. I went back to Poland for the first time in the early 90s, and it was an amazing trip because I got to meet some of the people that saved my dad, and I got to see where he actually grew up. This is his actual house of where he grew up. They, as I mentioned, were landowners. Right now, it was very overgrown. This was their backyard, but there's a tree line here, and behind the tree line was many, many acres of farmland. This is one of the very few pictures we have of my father and my aunt before the war, out in those fields that were behind the house. This house at the time was split down, and there was a section of this house that was being rented out to the foreman of the farm, which happened to be a very close friend of my grandfather. It was the Pilat family. And the Pilat family was a very, very important people that helped save my dad. Anthony Pilat was the father. This is a picture, one of the few we have of my grandfather. And this is Anthony Pilat with 4 out of his 7 children. This is his oldest daughter. And it's interesting. I'll have my dad tell you the story. You see, they lived in that house, but by around the 1941, when the Gestapo was really coming in, they kicked them out of their house because they had important dignitaries that needed to move in. And my father needed to find one room in a place somewhere. And so they had to move into this one room. And one night, my grandfather, who had been called down to police headquarters all the time, as I mentioned, he was the head of the Jewish community, and they constantly called him down to headquarters to give information on the Jewish people. And he one day didn't come back. And Dad, you're on mute, so if you can unmute yourself, why don't you tell everybody what happened that night when your father didn't come back? What happened, and where did Grandma? I know Grandma went back to Anthony Pilat to ask for help. Can you tell us about what happened in the next morning?
Well, first of all, hello, everybody. I didn't have the chance to say so. Let me say it now. Hope that everybody can hear me now. Well, just go to the question. When my mother found out from the wife of the police chief, she came to our house and she told my mom that she overheard the Gestapo talking with her husband. And the Gestapo mentioned to him that in the next few days or so, they will come and take all the Jews out from the town. So she says, when I heard this, I want to let you know about that. And I would strongly suggest that you take your 2 little kids and escape from here. Because I am sure you would be probably one of the first ones that the Gestapo would come and take. And she says, I don't have time to stay here and talk to you. Goodbye. Well, when Mom heard this, she was stunned. She didn't know what to do. But she decided, well, let me take the kids and go to our old house, to the Pilat family. Maybe they will have some ideas for me. So that's what we did. We went there. Mom tells them what she heard, and she's asking for help. Well, they say, look, it's late in the evening. Why don't we go and sleep? We have plenty of time. Tomorrow we sit down, we talk, we figure out something. I'm sure we figure out something. So they told my mom, well, why don't you go and sleep with, was a family member, and him, pointing at me, let him stay with me and sleep with my kids. Tomorrow morning we get together. Mom went to sleep. I went to sleep. Next morning, very early in the morning, the door opens and the Gestapo walks into the room. They go straight to his bed. They waking him up and they tell him, we were told that the Schonwetter family is here. Where are they? So he answers, they're not here. There's no Schonwetters here. So the Gestapo guy tells him, look, we know they are here. We got good information. I have people with me. We're going to search the property and we're going to find them. You're not cooperating. So we're going to find them and we're going to kill them and you. So last time I'm asking you, where are they? And he says, you go and look and you're not going to find them. He says, okay. So he tells the people to go and start searching. They walked out from the room. Then he decides to go behind them. But then he stops right by the door, turns around, looks at the group of kids sleeping. He pinpoints at one of them, of the oldest daughter, and he tells her, tell me quick, how many brothers and sisters do you have? Quick, quick, how many? And she says, 8. So he goes and he counts, 8 kids. So he walked out. Well, let me tell you, I was the luckiest kid in the world that she was smart enough to include me in the count of her brothers and sisters, because I don't think I'll be speaking to you today.
Mm.
Well, Mr. Pilat came and he says to the kids, get up quick, get dressed, go outside. Keep yourself playing, doing whatever you want. And then he tells me, and you walk out with them. But when you be outside, run behind the house, hide yourself in the bushes there, you know where they are. Don't come back to the house. Just sit and wait for me. And that's what happened. I was sitting there. He came and he took me and we went to my mom.
You know, it's funny. I actually had a chance to meet Mr. Pilat's daughter that did this. This is the daughter right here in this picture. And when I met her, literally we walked in, we got introduced, and the first thing she said to us was, it was me, I'm the one who did it, I'm the one who said it. And it was very sweet because that was like her story, and like her kids knew it and her grandkids knew it. It was like she was so proud of it, and she told everyone about it. It was quite amazing meeting this woman and experiencing her. And it was amazing, really, to get a chance to meet her. So after that night, Mr. Pilat figured the best place for them to go was a ghetto. They spent in one evening, they walked to the nearest ghetto, which was 15 miles away. It's about a 6.5-hour walk if you figure that out. And my grandmother went in the middle of the night with her children and Mr. Pilat, and they went to the ghetto. This is the actual route that they took to get to the ghetto. And actually, they spent 3 months in the ghetto. And it's easy to get in, not so easy to get out. So, Dad, can you tell us a little bit about what the conditions were like in the ghetto and how did you finally escape?
Well, when we walked into the ghetto, the first thing my mom decided to do just to get for ourselves someplace to live. So we started walking the streets. In every house we walked in was packed with people. There was no space whatsoever. While walking, we saw people living on the street. But finally, she found a little spot on the attic of one of the houses. She grabbed the spot and she says, okay, it's enough space here for us to be here, to sit next to each other. So first thing, after walking so many hours, I just have to tell you that 2 little kids, not eating almost a whole day. We were so hungry. We start crying and say, Mom, Mom, give us something to eat. We hungry. We want to eat. But she doesn't have any food. So she turns around and is asking the person next to her, can you tell me where I can get a little food for my kids? The answer was so simple. You get food when they give you food. You wait when they call you and they give you. That was the answer. So we waited again for a little while. Finally, they called and we go. We stay in line. When we got to the table, they gave us a cup of soup, which actually was warm water, had some color in it, and nothing else in it. Then you made another step. A person gave you a slice of bread, and that was it. And from this moment on, we found out that twice a day, every day, that was the food that we were getting. And that's what we lived on. So you can imagine from the amount of food that we were getting, we were constantly hungry. But we didn't have a choice. That was the food, so we ate whatever we got, and that was it. Conditions were horrible. The houses didn't have water, didn't have toilets. So we never washed. Toilets, we used behind the house someplace. If you found a little space and you use this as a toilet. We were sick. We got lice. Mom cut our hair because it was full of lice. It was so bad. It was horrible. We saw people dying. We somehow survived this. You didn't have doctors. You didn't have medicine. In other words, if you didn't survive your sickness somehow, you were dying, and that was it of you. So, living like that for about 3 months, we hardly, had strength to walk or anything. One day, a little boy came to my mom, and he says, listen, there is a man, and he's asking if anybody knows a Schonwetter. He's staying behind the fences there. Come on, I'll show you where he is. So he takes my mom, she goes, then who is there? Mr. Pilat. And he tells my mom, listen, go, bring your 2 kids, and I show you how to get out. Make it fast, we don't have time. So mom ran, she brought me and my sister, and he says, okay, I am throwing a blanket over the barbed wire. Now you pick up a child at a time and throw him over. Mom looks at him and she says, I wish I could. I don't have strength. I am weak. There is no way I can pick up even a little child like that. So he looks at her, yes, you can do it. I'm telling you, you can do it. Take a look at those 2 little kids. They are skin and bone. There is no weight there. Just try it. Do it quick. Don't think you cannot do it. Do it. So she tried and she did it. She threw 2 of us one at a time. Then he says, okay, you climb on the fence, jump over, and I catch you here. And she did it. And that's how we escape from the ghetto.
I always think that story, I remember hearing that story ever since I was a really little kid. And I never, when you hear a story your whole life, you don't realize how amazing it is until you become older and you become a mother and you think about what went through the head of my grandmother. It's amazing. I know that Mr. Pilat had arranged for a home to take you for a very short period of time, and you lived in an attic at the beginning, you lived in an attic for that first winter when you had come out of the ghetto. I remember being able to visit that attic back in 2009. My dad had taken us. This was the attic. It was part of the home of a family called the Jejic family, and they were also very important in saving my dad. It was one of those people that it was like a home base. So they couldn't hold you for very long, but if they could, they would hold you for a week or two until you could find someplace else to go. And my dad took us there and climbed this rickety ladder. At the time when my dad was hiding there were stairs throughout the house to get there. But we actually climbed into the attic, as you can see here. And I remember going into the attic and my dad pointing to the corner and saying, that's where it happened. And again, I remember hearing this story my whole life about how my dad was hiding in this attic one day, and they started to hear these footsteps coming up the ladder. And my grandmother quickly took the kids and she buried herself under the hay. And when the Gestapo soldier came up, there was a pitchfork on the side of the wall. And he grabbed the pitchfork. And I remember my dad telling me he would always remember that sound. And the sound was the pitchfork being stabbed into the hay, because the soldier figured that if there was someone hiding there, they would find them. And they got really lucky that day. They escaped with very minimal injury and never said a word. My grandmother put her hands over her two children's mouth and whispered and said, "Don't say or breathe a word." And so going back to that attic and experiencing that was really quite amazing. And Dad, I know you told me that in the summer months, you would go and you would hide in the forests, and the winter months, you would find people to take you in. And could you tell us a little bit of what you did in those summer months when you hid, and then talk to us about, one of the places that you hid? Like, I know one of the most memorable places, it was mentioned earlier, was the pigsty. Can you tell us those two stories of what life was like in the forest, and then also how you hid one time in the pigsty?
Well, during the period of time that was summertime, and we were always in the forest. So the first time when we went into the forest, well, one day, the first day actually, Mom was saying to us, I remember that even. She says, we must find some things to eat. I know that in the forest, there are certain items that grow and they are eatable, like mushrooms, different type of berries. So why don't we walk around and see if we can find some of them? So when we did and we found, she says, okay, those are the good ones. There are also ones, they are growing, look similar, more or less, but it's different. And they are poison ones. So you have to listen and listen good whatever I tell you, and explain to you how they look. So in the beginning, every time I'm going to make sure that we see both, and you have to learn which one we can eat, which one not. And that's how slowly, day by day, we were taught which one are good, which one are not. And we start picking the good ones and eat those. And that's basically how we lived in the forest through the summer times and eat those things. And that was our.
Did you ever have any close calls in the forest? I know that there was a one that sticks in my mind.
Yes. Well, while we were walking around looking for the mushrooms, the berries, or whatever, one time we came across we got about maybe 24, 25 people, Jewish people hiding. There were men, women, was a couple kids also. And when they saw Mom saw them, start talking. And then they say to Mom, you cannot sit in the forest just by yourself with two kids. It would be okay with us if you will join us. Be with us. It's so much easier. You see, there are some men here at night. They go to a village some far away from here. They steal some food. We always have something to eat. But you don't have anything. You cannot do those things. So come on and join us. Mom says, no, no, no. I will not join because I know a group of people big. It's so easy for someone to pass by, see the group, and call the police. I don't want it. I am fine. We have what to eat. We finding things to eat, and we happy. Thank you so much, and goodbye. She took us, and we walked away. So it didn't take too long, maybe 3 weeks after or so. All of a sudden, we hear shots, but then we hear like a machine gun. So my mom says to us, we have to run away from here because probably the Germans are here. Because she knew that machine guns, Polish police didn't have machine guns, only rifles. So she said, the Germans are here. Let's get out and run away from here. And she starts running towards where we heard the shots. So we little kids, and I say, Mom, don't go this way. Don't you hear the shots from there? The Germans are there. We have to run here ahead of us, away from the shots. And Mom says, you're right, we should. But if we're going to do it and they will come here and they will see that people were here, they will continue running and they will catch us. So what we need to do, you have to learn, we have to somehow sneak through and go behind them where they've been already. So this way we be safe. So we don't have a choice. She grabs our hands and we go. And that's what we did. We sneaked through behind them and we were hiding in this forest there. And then after quite a few hours waiting of everything, we didn't hear any more shooting or anything. We were going back to our place. And when we were going, we went through the place where they were. And what do we see? 20-some 5 people dead. Everybody was dead. But anyway, that was one of the incidents that we had in the forest.
I tell you, it's amazing her intuition. And, especially when I became a mother, I don't know if it amazes me how she thought like that, because she did it over and over and over again. I heard the stories of how she would go house to house begging them to take her in. And if someone would quickly say, sure, come stay with us, I'll take you and the children, she would say, okay, I'll be right back, and never show back up, because she knew that they probably were going to turn her in for a loaf of bread or a pound of sugar or some jam. But it was the ones that didn't want to take her and said, I'm sorry, I wish I could, but I have children and a family. Those were the ones that she begged, because she knew that they would never give them up because they were too afraid to hurt their family. I don't think I would have thought like that. It's amazing. And Dad, so you were telling me once how she found a farmer who was willing to take you in, and he had a very unique place of hiding you.
Yes, so when we got into this place, the farmer tells us, I will take you. You know I am scared, but I see you to live with 2 little kids. I want to help you out. But I have to make sure that if I'm going to hide you in my place, it's going to be someplace I have to figure out a place that nobody will suspect that somebody is hiding there. So you have to wait a day at least, and then come back. So we didn't wait too long. One day it came back. So when we got back, he says, okay, let me show you. He takes us into a pigsty, and he shows us, you see, I dig a hole here. Now, the hole is very shallow. You cannot even sit here. The only way you can be in this hole is to lay down, and that's it. Do you think it would be okay for you this way? You'll be okay? Mom says, what's the difference if I stay, sit, or lay? As long as I have a spot here, we'll be fine, thank you. So he says, okay, step in and lay down. That's what we did. We see he's taking pieces of wood. He covers the whole top. Then he takes hay, throws on top of it. And then a minute later or so, we hear the pigs coming in and start jumping on top of us. We got scared. So my God, if they break those pieces of wood, they're going to kill us here. But somehow they quiet down, and we lived in this spot through the whole winter. The condition was not so good. We couldn't sit. The only way, of course, we were laying all the time. Now, when the nature called, you couldn't get out and go somewhere. So my mom found a little corner. In a corner, she said, that's enough space there to use this as our toilet. So to get to it, we were like rolling over one another, then go, did our share, then roll back to the place. And that's how we basically live all winter. And then when the pigs will start doing something on top of it, and it was a liquid, was dripping on us occasionally, it wasn't pleasant, trust me. It was not pleasant. But it was a place we didn't have to walk in the snow, sleep in the snow, be hungry a whole day. before we finally found somebody to take us in. So we were happy living under those horrible conditions. And then when the spring came and he finally let us out from there, well, we hardly could stay on our legs. We were so no strength. Our bones and everything were in horrible condition. But somehow we slowly got back to ourselves.
It's amazing. I mean, and you know, in the interest of time, of course, we can't go through every single story, but there's so many different creative places that you were hiding, between barns and barn floorboards and in potato patches, and then in trees in the woods for 3 years. They were hiding like this. And so I believe, Dad, it was in late 1944, early 1945, when you finally had to leave the forest because the front was coming. Just tell us how you got liberated and how you ended up leaving the forest and what happened.
Well, it was 1944 in the fall. All of a sudden we heard explosions, and Mom says, looks like the German army is close to us. There's no way we can still continue living in the forest. So then a few days later, we see farmers, groups of farmers escaping the front line. So my mom says, okay, what we going to do? We're going to follow them wherever they go. We just go behind them and we see probably they know where to go. And then she told us, now let me tell you, your new names, Polish names are so-and-so. Now look at me and I show you, I'll tell you and show you that in case we be lucky that the farmer takes us in, gives us a room or a shelter to live with them, you have to learn Polish people are Christians. When they sit down to eat, they make a prayer, they cross themselves. When Sunday comes, they go to church. So I will explain you the procedures and you listen and make sure when you sit by the table, she showed us how to cross. When you sit, listen what they say and slowly try to remember. So this way you can be part of the whole thing. When we go to the church, when people going to kneel, you do that. When they get up, you get up. Just follow whatever, look what people do, you do the same. Remember that. And that's what we did. Farmer took us and we lived with the farmer. And then in 1945, by the end of February, about, all of a sudden everything quieted down. And then we saw some soldiers coming in, different uniforms, different looks. That's not Germans. Who are they? They came and they started speaking. We couldn't understand one word what they were saying. But then one of them says, I know Polish. We are the soldiers of the Soviet Union. We liberated you. You're free. There is no more Germans here. You can go home. Don't be afraid. We made sure there is no Germans around it. You go home. Well, let me tell you, when we heard those words, we couldn't believe ourselves that we free, we can go home, that the war is over for us.
I know you tried to go home, but there was nothing really left there.
That's
And
right.
after, I think it was, 2 weeks, you realized nobody else was coming back and you ended up moving to a larger town.
Right, right. That's what we did.
You know, it's amazing because, as I mentioned, I've heard so many of these stories my whole life. And even knowing them, and even knowing about these good people that helped save my dad, I still didn't get it. And in 2009, I had a trip back to Poland that changed my life forever. This little town of Brzostek had been contacted by a gentleman whose family had immigrated long before the war. He was a professor from England, and he was very into genealogy. And he figured out that his family was from Brzostek and that this Jewish community had been destroyed during the war and the Jewish cemetery had been destroyed. And he asked the mayor if they would reconsecrate and allow them to reconsecrate and rebuild the Jewish cemetery. And the town got behind it and found out that my dad and my aunt, as well as one other, it was a relative, a son of a survivor, was still alive. And they asked us to come to Poland for this event. And the day started where we went and we pulled up to that house that I showed you in the beginning. People came out from across the street and started recognizing my dad and my aunt, and remembered that they used to play with them as children. They started recounting stories about how they used my grandparents' house to separate the Jews, and how when a Jew did actually try to escape and run away from the line when he was being put on the truck, they beat him on the street, and they were told that if they would help this man, that they too would be killed, and they had to wait 3 days watching him to die. And that's how my day started. And then we went into the center of town, and the center of town, they put this plaque up, and this plaque was put up on the town hall that actually housed the jail. Now, I want to remind you, this is a part of Poland that in the early 90s, they had horses and buggies that they were driving. They are so far out there. There's been not one Jewish person that has lived here since 1942. And this town, in the center of town, has erected a plaque on Town Hall that is acknowledged and commemorated the Jewish community that lived there. Now, this jail cell actually holds a special place for me because we found out that my grandfather was in this jail cell, and Mr. Pilat's son-in-law was working in the jail cell and let him out of the jail and said, take a walk. And my grandfather came back a half hour later, and he said, what are you doing? Don't you understand what I'm saying? Go, get your family, run, get out of here. They're coming for you. And he said, I understand exactly what you're going to do, but I am the head of this Jewish community, and I refuse to allow them to use my running as the excuse for why they murder us all. So I will die with my people, but please, my children, my family, please take care of them. And I felt like this was like my grandfather made his last grand stand. And here they were acknowledging that he even existed. There was about 40 townspeople that came out that day. And I was like, wow, people actually care. Like I was shocked. But what happened that shocked me more was when they said, let's go down to the cemetery. And it was a beautiful sunny day, and we're walking and skipping along. And as we turned the corner, there was this large tent that was erected. Over 600 townspeople had come to witness this day. We found out that the town learned about the project and started to dig up masonry work in their own homes, because when the Germans came through and destroyed the cemetery, they used headstones as masonry work. And these townspeople were looking for anything with Jewish lettering in their walls, in their driveways, anywhere. And they would chisel them out and brought them back to this area. And they were able to recover 33 headstones, one of which was my great-grandfather's. They allowed us to erect a memorial, and my father said Kaddish for my grandfather for the first time. They, as you could see, tons of people. The head priest from the local parish was there, along with the head rabbi of Poland. But this doesn't end. It's very difficult to see, but in the back corner here, these are buses, charter buses. They put us along with a few Jewish people that come, and they took us to the local high school where kids and their parents Googled authentic Jewish food and created a 20-foot buffet for us of home-cooked food, along with a part that they made kosher with the rabbi there for those that were observant. Kids learned Hebrew and sang Hebrew songs to us and put this whole beautiful concert on for us. And all day I was trying to figure out, why are they doing this? And I realized I didn't find an answer. I couldn't figure out what was in it for them. And I went up to the mayor at the end of the day, and my mom translated for me, and I said, I want to thank you for what you've done here. You've given me a place to bring my children back. You've given me a place. And he stopped me and he says, I don't want your thanks. There's no thanks necessary. This was the right thing to do and the only thing to do. And as corny as it sounds, it changed me. It changed me to my soul, because it reminded me, it made me realize people are really good. There are good people out there. And it's up to us to find those people and make sure we use our voices for goodness and kindness and not for hatred and violence. By that point, I came back and I thought it was time, and I decided it was time to get my dad's story down. It started with a blog where every single week for 6 months, I interviewed my dad and peppered him with every question you could imagine. And I started it as a blog for my family, just to get them to know the story. By 2016, I met up with another woman who said, we're going to do this. She re-interviewed my dad for another 6 months. And it's amazing how much a parent will tell a stranger and not their child, because some of the stuff is so ugly or embarrassing, and they were uncomfortable to tell their children. It turned into Together, a Journey for Survival, which, as I mentioned, did have curriculum that was added. And we started speaking in schools. And we quickly realized, no shock, but to me it was a shock because I'm not a teacher, or I had nothing really to do with the education system. There's no budgets in the school. And a school wanted to bring books in for $300 for the school, and they had to go to the local synagogue to get a donation. So I started researching, where can schools get money? And they couldn't. And that's when my sister and I decided it was time to do something about that. And we started the Mark Schonwetter Holocaust Education Foundation, we are the only foundation that exists that gives grants to teachers nationwide for Holocaust education. And our grants are capped at $1,000. And we fund everything from bringing speakers in, Holocaust survivors, speakers, or 2Gs or 3Gs. We will fund books to be brought into the classroom, programming, the Butterfly Project, going to see Holocaust museums. We will help subsidize the cost of transportation, especially when you get into some of these remote states that do not have Holocaust education mandated. Only 25 states have Holocaust education mandated. Our grants have reached schools in 31 states nationwide, and we've reached over 110,000 students in just our 4 short years. And we're only just starting. There's so much more that we should and can be doing. But I have to tell you, when October 7th happened, it put me into a really dark place. And just like I don't know if many of you felt the same way, I started to feel very alone. Me and my girlfriends would talk about the world was against us, and I really spiraled. I was on TikTok and Instagram and watching all the videos and all of the protests and thinking, oh my God, Mike, like you said, anti-Semitism. I knew it was always there. Social media made it more prevalent. But then October 7th, and it happened, and it was as if the Jews were all of a sudden the devil incarnate. It was unbelievable what was happening. And I got about 2 or 3 weeks after, I got to the point where I was at my lowest point. I was at work. I had to leave in the middle of the day. I was hysterically crying, called a girlfriend of mine up. And that afternoon, my daughter called me. My daughter's 23. She just graduated college, and she went to school in North Carolina. And while she was at school in North Carolina, she befriended this woman, Janice. Janice is a late 60s or so. I think she's about 68-year-old Black woman, and they became very good friends. And that day, Janice texted Lexi, my daughter, to find out how she was doing and to check in with her because she knew that things were really getting kind of bad if you were Jewish. And then she said, can I talk to you? Because I don't understand everything that's going on. And I don't want to look online. I really want to understand what exactly is happening over there right now. And so Lexi called me up. She said, will you talk to Janice? Because I'm not qualified. I don't know enough about history. I said, sure. And I spoke to Janice the next morning. And Janice and I had the loveliest conversation. She reminded me about the goodness. She reminded me about the people that are out there that really are good. And we talked. She told me about how alone she felt when George Floyd happened. And she felt as a Black woman that she was so alone, no matter what everybody was saying that they understood, they didn't understand. And she said, is that how you feel right now? Do you feel alone? I said, yes. And she was asking me all kinds of questions about what was happening, about Hamas, about Israel, the whole thing. But the main thing here is Janice reminded me about never forgetting, because I forgot. I forgot what I had been preaching all along. I forgot about the goodness. And she reminded me of that. And that's what I want to remind all of you. I really want to remind everybody here that we all have that choice. We could all fall into that horrible spiral that we all feel like we're in right now about the horribleness of what's happening in the world. But I'm going to choose to focus on the good. And I'm going to choose to focus on those that are standing up and are talking and being our allies and are talking about it in a positive way. And so I hope that you all will join me, because we have to drown out those voices of hatred. So with that, I know there's so much more. My dad has so many more stories. I'm sure you have tons of questions for him. I would love to hear from all of you what your questions are. And I want to thank you for giving us the time and the platform to speak with you today and tell you a little bit about our foundation as well.
Thank you so much, Ann and Mark. I mean, this was amazing. And I am going to tell everyone one more time. So I heard Ann and Mark speak a couple of months ago, and I said, oh my God, this is amazing. I would love for you to speak on this program. And after I did that, I found out that Ann wrote a book. And I read the book and I went, wait a second, you didn't mention any of this in this testimony. And what was mentioned today is just brushing the surface. There is so much more that happened in Mark's testimony, and it's incredible. One thing that came to mind as you were speaking is that, Mark, your mother was so in tune and so aware. And I know in the book, it's mentioned a little bit about her experience as a child, but do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about her, what like led her to understand how to survive in the forest and all of these other things? Because I think we take it for granted. I know she understood that, but what did she go through before that led her to kind of have these experiences and learn that?
I'll be very honest by saying that I really don't know how she got to the point to be so positive, so kind, and so I would say, to tolerate us, two little kids crying, screaming sometimes, not being, being hungry or wet or whatever. She always somehow had an answer for everything, but a positive answer. Never yelled at us. In the worst situations we were, whenever, forest or hiding or whatever, she always a nice way explaining, calm down, giving, for example, why we were hiding in the forest. Of course, summertime, pollen, rainy season, rain, we wet, and you sit wet day and night, crying. Mom, we wet, we cold. She was smiling, says, don't worry. I think, take a look at the sky. Tomorrow is going to be sunny. And tomorrow when it's sunny, you're going to take off your clothes, you're going to hang it on a tree, they will dry out, and you see, you'll be fine. I mean, that's a simple little example like that. Always the positive way with the smile and everything. How she got this, God bless, I don't know. But that's the type of a person she was.
Amen. And after not knowing what happened to her husband and caring for two little children and her life being totally upended from, I think from what I understand, your family was a wealthy family in town. So going from that to living under a pig in a pigsty, it's unbelievable. But I think also from what I gather in the book, your mother, her family survived the pogroms. And I think just learning how to escape some of those massacres and attacks, I think that was part of also where she learned some
Probably,
things.
right.
So when I was researching the book, I interviewed not only my dad, but my aunt as well. Now, my grandmother, my aunt my aunt still lives in Israel. And my aunt lived across the street from my grandmother her whole life. So she knew a lot more of the story. So when I was interviewing my aunt and I was asking her some of these questions, she told me, well, grandma was the daughter of farmers. And so she learned from them and they had taught her when they were little. So I got a lot of information. It's funny because some of the stories my dad tells, I heard it from my aunt and she filled in some of the pieces that made more sense. And so the book is a combination of the testimony of both my dad and my aunt and how I was able to piece it all together and then research it as well. So, but I remember that was the hardest thing writing the book was at one point I realized think about your grandma, right? Your grandma's like this sweet little old lady that gives you milk and cookies and you lie on her shoulder and she's so nice. And writing the book, I started going, oh crap, she was a woman. She was a mother. I mean, I lost it at one point thinking of what she had to actually go through. There's a question, I think Rosa was asking if we have any recordings of my grandmother. So she was recorded for the Shoah Foundation. And if you would indulge me for a moment, I'm going to share my screen again. We actually have here, and this is my grandmother talking.
Ciężkich warunkach i w takich okrutnych, jak ja przeżyłam z dwojgiem dzieci, to mi się należy, nie mam słów powiedzieć, bo to w historii nie było, a w historii powinno być. I powinni dzieci, i wnuki, i prawnuki, i w ogóle to nie zapomnieć i żeby to wiedzieli zawsze co było. To były czasy okropne.
So from the words of my grandmother, we must remember.
Amazing. And your grandmother lived to see her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, right?
Yes,
I mean,
thank God she lived till 2002.
God bless. bless him.
Yes.
Wow.
94 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then another question, Mark, you and your younger sister, how did your mom manage to bring two small children into hiding? Were there any concerns about what it would be like to have children with her and other people while you're trying to escape and hide? And then also, how did you pass the time? I can't imagine. You're inside this small little space. How do kids have fun? How do they not go wild?
No, unfortunately, we didn't have any fun because it was mom's rule. Well, it was not her rule, kind of she was imposed to apply this rule that every farmer, if he took us, one thing they were saying to mom, well, I'm taking you, but you have to make sure that those two little kids don't laugh, don't cry, don't talk. They have to be constantly quiet. I don't want to hear a sound from them. So when we were hiding in the attic, in the hay, or in the pigsty, or any place, if we did talk, was whispering to each other's ear to make sure that there is no sound. So we didn't have any fun, call it, or any kind of contacts to talk and do some things. Of course, there was no toys to play or anything. Forget about it. Even talking, we were kind of limited in the sound, so we couldn't talk. But she was making sure that we quiet, and that's how we were brought up.
And yet she was able to keep you guys, it sounds like, educated from what I read in the book, teaching you your
Yes.
letters and numbers throughout in this small spaces, even just writing it out on your fingers so you
On our
could,
fingers, yeah.
you know, unbelievable.
Mhm.
I also want to open this up for anyone else here to share any questions or comments that they have. And I also want to say that we have some of our youngest viewers here tonight. I see Avery. So I'm so happy you guys are here. Yeah, if anyone, do I see, is it Suzanne? Do you have, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
I was just writing a note to Ann, but thank you. So my mother is from Ciechanów and my father is from Radom, which are cities in Poland. I'm just writing you this long letter here. And my parents did not have a desire to go back to Poland. And so over the last couple years, the mayor of Radom has reached out to me. They were having like a reunion of the second generation. And because my parents had no desire, I have no desire to, but I have gone back only because I had to bring closure for myself to see where my parents are from. I saw it and that was it. I spent a few hours in each city. I saw it and I'm done. But I have no desire. So they have like a festival, if you will, like a 2 or 3 day festival. They invite the residents of the city. There are no Jews left in this city, but they have this festival. They want to have all the 2Gs, whoever wants to go. I take it upon myself to pass on this information to all the second generation from Radom. You want to go? Go. Geigersintheit if you want. I'm not going, but I pass it on if you want to go. But you know, it's sort of, you have a wonderful attitude, Ann, but my thing is, my parents needed you in 1939, 1940, 1941, 42, 43, 44, and 45. You weren't there for them. I guess I'm not going now. So, but I guess they're reaching out to me. You have a very wonderful, positive attitude. I just can't get myself to go.
You know, I
So-
think part of it is also where in Poland it is. And in, like I said, this tiny little village, they not only embraced us.
Right.
My dad can share the story of what actually happened to his father. Actually, Dad, why don't you tell us, explain to everyone how you found out what happened to your father, and then I'll share.
So I will just tell you, so my
Okay.
father was in a concentration camp for a couple of years and that was it. So there was no one that saved them. His, father ended up in Treblinka and my mother's family ended up also in
Yeah.
Auschwitz and, done.
No,
So-
there was a lot of people that didn't help.
Right. So your father, thank God, had found, the honorable Polish person that risked their life to save him. And
Mhm.
my parents didn't have that fortune. So,
Exactly. No, I understand. I
so
understand.
anyways, but I did go back to see their towns. I had to do that. And my husband's parents are from Germany and they had a little different story. And I'll say it real quickly. In my husband's case, in their little town in Germany, when the Nazis came in the shul, the synagogue was in a castle. So the Nazis didn't, the shul was in a castle. They didn't destroy the castle, but they threw the Torahs in the street. So a non-Jewish person kept the Torahs. And in 2003, they restored the Torahs to that synagogue. So they do exist today. The Torahs were restored and we
That's
have
wonderful.
visited the synagogue, right? Even though there's no Jews anywhere, but
Mhm.
it does exist with the Torahs today. So, and in Poland, when I did try to go into my mother's house, of course, they wouldn't open the door, which is, you hear that all the time in Germany, which believe me, they don't love us either. I was able to walk through the house that belonged to my Jim's, my husband's family. They did let us walk through the home.
Oh, that was wonderful. I see, Rosa, you've got your hand up.
I would like to ask Mark, first of all, thank you both for sharing your experiences. It was very moving
Yes,
to
it
listen
was.
to you.
Thank
My question is, Mark, could you tell us something about your journey briefly, of course, to America? Because I know that Michael mentioned it in the beginning, and that looks like there's room for another book there.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, I came to the United States in 1961, and I came already from Israel, not from Poland. My mom happened to have 3 sisters and a brother that came to the United States in 1920 something. So when we got to Israel in 1957, soon after that, I asked Mom, and she wrote to one of her sisters and asked if she can send papers for me. And she sent papers, so I got a permission to immigrate to United States. And I came here, as it was mentioned before, without knowing one word of English, having a lot of money, $5 in my pocket. And I stood with my aunt, but then she says, you have to get a job, you have to do something. You cannot sit day and night home. I said, that's right, but I don't know where to go, what to do, because I didn't have any profession. So I started looking for a job. Her son used to go with me, my cousin. Any place we walked in, let's say from a gas station to any kind of store or any place, the minute they said a word to me, I didn't answer because I didn't understand one word. So they say, you don't speak English. I didn't, understood what they were saying. But my cousin says, no, he doesn't. Forget it. Get out. No job. No job. I couldn't get a job. But somehow I got lucky because my cousin knew a family
And he, just so you know, he lived in Poland under the communist regime until 1957. So he only lived in Israel for a short time. You see, we have another question.
I see that we have, is it Avery? Do you want to ask a question? I'll ask you to unmute yourself.
After you got freed, did you go to school?
Dad, once you were free, did you go to school?
Yes, after we were freed, my mom took us to a school to enroll us, me and my sister. And my sister was younger than me, so they kind of looked over her late age, and she did go to first grade. Me, I was older than her for about 2.5 years. They wouldn't let me go to first grade, was too old. They said, no, he's too old to go to school. I don't know what you want to do with him, but no school. So my mom went to the principal and she says to him, what would you do if I would hire a private teacher? He will give my son lessons, and then you can give him a test and see if he makes progress. And then you would say, okay, this covers first grade or second grade. Then we continue doing it till you decide that he's already capable to go to school, to whatever grade you feel it's right. And he agreed. So I was taking private lessons. And finally, when I passed the test, being able to go to 6th grade already, so I went to 6th grade. And that's how I finished public school. Then I finished high school. And then I enrolled into university. I had about 2 years in law school, but the opportunity came and we left for Israel. But when I got to Israel, there was no chance for me to go to school because somebody had to start working and making a living. A girl, forget it, couldn't get a job. A boy, if he was lucky, maybe yes. So I went. So my sister went in Poland to medical school. So she went to university in Jerusalem, and they accepted her. So she went to school. I went to work. I worked a little bit, but then I left and came to here. That was my education.
Amazing. We've got a lot of people saying thank you for everything and having such beautiful accolades in the comments. For you and your family. I have a bunch more questions. So if everyone, if you don't mind entertaining some of them, but of course, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And the first one I want to ask, and again, if everyone wants to raise their hands, please feel free or unmute yourself. And Avery, I just want to say thank you for that wonderful question. I just want to ask what part Judaism or religion or God played in your lives, your family's lives, your life before, during, and after the Holocaust?
Well, before the war, my parents were religious people. I don't remember much about this, be honest with you. I know he was religious and everything, but that was it. Now, during the war, religion faded away. Where we were hiding, forget it, we never talked about religion. We never even knew what day it is. We never knew when a holiday is in between even to mention that. You couldn't ask a farmer, do you know when is Rosh Hashanah? They wouldn't get the right answer here. So we didn't know anything. Now, after the war was another issue because Poland became a communist nation. And if you know about communism, communist doesn't observe religion. So again, there was no way to practice religion. And the few Jewish people that were in the town that we lived after the war, there was no synagogue because you're not allowed to open a synagogue. So the only thing that we knew, because Mom was bringing up, was we knew when we have a new year and we knew when is Passover. Those two big holidays we observed by having dinner home. Mom cooked and made as a dinner for holiday it is. So again, I was not brought up in religion anyway. So the only way, I'll be honest with you, I obey by the Jewish traditions. After I lived here, I learned more the holidays and this. So when I got married and had kids, we obeyed. I did send my kids to Hebrew school. We went on a holiday to the service, but that's as far as the religion was involved.
And in your testimony, I've never heard of so many good people helping Jews like I heard when I read your book. And number one, I wish we had time to talk about Bronca and this story about your mother who, said at first she wasn't Jewish and all of these things. So again, I'll just tell everyone, read the book, read the book, read the book.
Read the book, right?
There's just so much. But have any of your Polish neighbors or the people who helped you, were any of them ever honored by the righteous among the nation as righteous among the nations?
One person was. That's all. Then we kind of didn't support. We didn't give any names after that. We didn't give. And I'll be honest with you, because this person lived in a different area, not in area of Brzostek here. And then some people were making not pleasant comments to the person, and she was sharing this with us. So we figured, better not to do it and not make them their life miserable.
But I will say my grandmother kept in touch with these people throughout her entire life, to the point that we still actually keep in touch with some of the grandchildren. When we visited Poland in 2016, so in 2012, they actually uncovered the mass grave where my grandfather was murdered. Some kind Jewish people, some kind non-Jewish people, we don't know who, had actually brought this tombstone and anonymously left it at this place. It was discovered in 2012. And it basically says that the memorial commemorates the people, and it gave the date. Crazy enough, August 12th is also the date that my nephew, my dad's youngest grandson, was born on August 12th. And we found out that was the day his father died. But they found the mass grave in the center of town. On that trip, we went to go visit it. This gentleman right down here in the bottom corner, this is Anthony Piwat's grandson. You can kind of see the resemblance. After the war, my grandmother had a house that she had on her property. She actually kept her property and was able to sell it off, and that's how she got money. But she gave one of her homes to the Piwat family, and they have it still in they own the property, and the grandson lives there. It's now been rebuilt into a new home, but he kept part of the wall of the original home, and he made it into a shrine because he said the story is as much their story as it is ours, and this is to remind their whole family of what they had done and to make sure everyone remembers the whole thing. So we still keep in touch with the family.
Wow, that's remarkable. I was going to ask about if any family members ever attempted to reclaim their land or homes after the war. It sounds like that was understood, that it would stay with this family.
Yeah, we were very fortunate that my grandmother, like I said, it was a tiny village. They knew she owned it, and then she would sell off pieces of land. And the people that bought her home, it's the granddaughter that still lives there. When we've been back every single time, and Suzanne, I feel so terrible that you had such a different experience. And I know that it's not the same everywhere. But when we went there, they were beyond kind, opened the home up. They gave us tours of the home, of what it looked like in 2009, which was 1991. It wasn't even really done. Went back to 2009. They were beyond kind, how they opened their home to us and showed us. And my dad was walking around showing us, this is the room here, this was this. So it was quite amazing.
They may be very kind if I would give them the opportunity and go to Rodham to one of these festivals. They have invited me year after year after year. I'm the one that has declined. So
I
they may
completely
be very
understand.
nice to me. I just haven't gone.
I understand.
I definitely understand.
So, well, I know that we're getting close to the end. And Michael, if I may end with another poem, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. 100%.
So this is a poem again that I wrote when I was much younger, but I realize how relevant it is today. The question who, the answer me. The question where, the answer here. The question how, the answer within. The question when, the answer now. The question what, the answer never forget. So thank you all.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Mark. I cannot thank you guys enough. This is incredible. I will say again, if anyone wants to pick up the book, it is so worth the read. And I look forward to continuing this conversation again in our next 2G Tuesdays and Sundays with survivors. Thank you all for being here, and yeah, happy and healthy new year and everything.
Thank you all. Have a happy and a healthy.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, everyone.